My name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. Today, I am reviewing Dreams of Fire by Nathaniel Wayne. This is a YA fantasy all about a young elemental named Ferris who kinda controls fire, except not really, because sometimes it just bursts out of him, and as a result, he is on the run. If he gets caught, he will be dragged back to the science guild to be experimented on, and he's not a fan. So, in general, he's kind of just wandering on the run, looking for elusive freedom without really knowing where he's going. And right away, this was one of those books where I knew in my gut what the star rating was going to be, and then I had to evaluate that to figure out what the actual aspects of the book were that made me want to give that star rating. Like, it's almost like it started off with a vibe check. So I had to start doing some thinking, and one of the things that came up was the world building. This world is a definite mix of that kind of high fantasy standard archetype with taverns and horses and that kind of thing, but also there were some heavy scientific stuff. There were cars, there were these rifles that shot like bolts of lightning and things. I think they called it like a electricity cage or something. It was basically a battery, and that in theory could be really cool, showing this kingdom, this country in a state of technological flux, because technology isn't instant in how it spreads. There were several years in the real world of having horse and buggies on the road alongside cars, especially because the rich tend to get access to technology first, and then it slowly spreads out to everyone else. So I thought at first that it was that kind of thing, but there was really no distinction made between these are the wealthy people, they have access to this technology, here are the poor people, they do not. It was a lot of the technology seemed to come and go as the plot needed it, as opposed to the character really moving through the world in a more realistic verisimilitude way. Like, okay, these caravan people seem to be doing really well for themselves, but they're still using horses. But this random dude at the beginning has a car even though he's in middle of nowhere. So it was kind of, I couldn't understand the logic of the technology being used within the world itself. And I did find out late in the book that there's supposed to be a theme of nature versus technology, but it didn't come until late, because for a large portion of the book, everyone had a very healthy fear of the Fae in this story. It is very standard, goblins, red skulls, or red caps, I think they're called, type creatures that will, take you on and kill you if you harm the woods. So everyone knows to give it a wide berth. And it was that kind of very, very healthy fear and respect for the woods that kind of made the nature versus technology fight later on feel like it came out of nowhere. I would have liked more emphasis on some greedy person being like, I'm tired of the Fae taking all this stuff. Screw it, we're encroaching on their territory. Or someone that doesn't believe the Fae are real. Every single person is like, yep, the Fae exists, they're 100% here. I didn't get the conflict in theory until way later, at the climax or leading into the third act. So I would have liked a little bit more emphasis on that. As for Ferris himself, I was having a little bit of trouble with him because, as a general rule, I like characters that have something they're going after. It doesn't have to be a grand quest, but this I think he's supposed to be around 15 or 16. He is just always flying by the seat of his pants, except not really, which was the other thing. Ferris doesn't make a ton of plans compared to other characters in the story. He wants to get to the city of Torvek, which does have some pretty good world building just within I think it's a city state. But beyond that, it's kind of a vague whatever. And he does not make the plans of getting out of Torvek. He does not make the moving forward decisions. Other people do. Other people are helping him, which not necessarily a bad thing, but his arc, which again, I didn't realize until later what it was supposed to be, is about him taking his own life in his own hands and learning to control his elemental fire and moving forward. I never really saw that in the actual text until it was explicitly stated later. There is one moment in which he uses his own abilities for the first time, and it's supposed to be this big moment. But the thing is that it's just slightly speeding up someone else's plan that's already been decided ahead of time. So it wasn't like no one else can do this, he is going to do this for himself. It was just he got tired of waiting, so he sped up someone else's plan. Add that to the fact that there were multiple characters seeking after him, and at times Ferris honestly felt more like the MacGuffin than the protagonist, like he's just hanging out and sitting around. This book also seemed to move at times very quickly and also very not, in focus on the plot, where a lot would happen, and then for a large portion of the book, it just takes place in this room. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that nothing happens. In theory, that would be the perfect place to have, like, these two characters, they're trapped in this room together because plot. Let's have a conversation. Let's learn some things. But you don't really learn a lot. And I realized later that was because there was going to be a big reveal. And I liked the reveal of who was who and who was going after who. But because it was keeping that reveal a secret and keeping them from talking to each other, it literally just felt like I was reading two people wandering around a room they were stuck in, as opposed to growing the characters a little bit more. There wasn't a lot of just learning about the characters' style of dialogue. There's a matron, motherly type character that helps heal, and she pops up when the protagonist needs healing and then kind of goes away again. And you don't get a lot more about her. And I wish things had kind of been, what's the word I'm thinking here? Marinated. I wish there had been more time to sit and delve into what are people's opinions on the Fae, on the technology. I mean, we live in a modern day where people always got something to say about the technology. Presumably a country in this kind of flux where these guilds are controlling the technology, people got a lot to say. They have opinions. And while yes, the idea of a character that's just expository vomiting their entire reasoning and backstory to you, people do still talk about themselves a decent amount, and to a certain extent that should come out. Ferris as a character also had this thing where he would be super paranoid to super trusting, purely depending on what the plot called for, and it didn't make a ton of sense to me why he would go from completely trusting a stranger to completely not trusting a stranger. Like, if he's traumatized by, horrid backstory reasons, it would make sense for him to distrust everyone, but then suddenly he would super trust this person on sight because that's what moved the plot forward. The plot did pick up a lot in the third act. I really did like those reveals of the twisted expectations. You're set up to believe one thing and then, oop, nope. I liked that a lot. And then it kind of exploded. Like, the actual big giant thing that happens at the end of this book seems only nominally connected to Ferris's story. Now, that necessarily isn't a bad thing. The whole concept of a wanderer coming through and getting caught up in someone else's fight is a fairly standard story archetype, but it didn't seem to affect him after all that much either. And in general, I didn't see much difference in the character from the end of the book to the beginning of the book. It didn't feel like it told me he'd grown, but I didn't see it. I would have liked to see him really harness and use his own magic for big purposes. And then there was, I can't say much because of spoilers, but there was a scene at the end that had been nearly the entire book had been leading up to, and it was incredibly anticlimactic. And I was like, really? Everything for that? And then we just move on? So that was kind of disappointing. I did like the focus on nature versus technology in theory, but there were a lot of things that you needed to delve a lot more into the morality of. Like, you literally have a science guild doing experiments on humans, And presumably, considering the fact that there's this series of marshals that are like contracted by the government of this land, it is considered legal to trap and experiment on these humans. Like, I needed more focus on that idea, because there's one character that I feel like the book was trying to downplay the fact that she participates in human experimentation. Trapping and experimenting on humans, but it's kind of downplaying that because it doesn't want you to think too hard about the fact that this woman runs tests on unwilling subjects that are sentient. So I needed more. There was a big secret that was revealed that also had some gigantic moral implications that is never really brought up. Like, it was just kind of this, so many cool ideas, but they all needed a little bit more focus and a little bit more delving into, and I wanted to see Ferris try and do more things for himself as opposed to following someone else's plan and just getting caught up and being used as a pawn by other people. Because again, it tells you he found his freedom. He kind of fights back at one point, but that was also the anticlimactic scene. So it's like, I didn't feel like I'd actually watched him grow. I didn't feel like the book actually dived deep into the themes it brought up. There were a lot of great ideas. There were a lot of cool concepts. You could obviously see that a lot of work had gone into the world building of Torvik, which is the main city that it takes place in, and it takes place like half on land and half in a lake, and the city is kind of like bisected. It was a really cool idea. Granted, I needed the map to remember what the setup was, but that's standard for me. High fantasy world building has never been easy on my brain. Regardless, I would have loved to see just more marinating on the concepts, on the characters. Show me a little bit more about their personalities in depth. There were a couple moments where you were supposed to see like these really tense relationships and one character feeling betrayed by another character, and it was supposed to be this big emotional moment, but you didn't really have any time developing the relationship between those characters. So I'm like, I know in my brain, I know this is emotional. I don't feel it. And it goes back to the tell versus show thing. Granted, when you want a reader to know something, tell them. If you want them to feel something, show it. So in general, I gave this book 3 stars. Great ideas. I think that the author moving forward could definitely be writing some amazing work with a little bit more of that marinating, with a little bit more of delving into the really like nitty gritty of the morality and the themes. But this one, it just felt a little bit too surface level for me to really get hit by the feels, which is what I usually want in a book. However, I would still be interested to see what other works outside of this, I believe it is a series, the author has to work with moving forward. If you are an indie author and you would like a review something like this one, please let me know. I will have all of my information down in the description below. Please be sure to give my review policy a read through. It answers a lot of questions and saves us a lot of time. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.